Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting for the Woodland-Davis Clean Water Agency. Please let the record show that we're starting the meeting for the February 15th, 2023 meeting. It is 3:33 and all of our directors are present. That being said, we are going to jump right into our first agenda item for agency business, oath of office for newly appointed Director Bapu Vaitla for the City of Davis. Sure. No, that's fine. And then in this format, we can just do all at once without back and forth, right? Online, it was calling each person. No. Perfect. Yeah, right? No problem. All right, so we will move on to agenda item number 1, the oath of office for newly appointed Director Bapu Vaitla. And I will turn that over to who's going to administer the oath. All right, thank you, Michelle.
We want to sign his name in blood, too.
Sign in blood. I, Bapu Vaitla,
Do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
do solemnly affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this oath freely without any mental reservations or purpose of evasion,
that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
All right, congratulations, Director Vaitla, and welcome to the team. So we're going to move to agenda item number 2, approval of agenda and consent items. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, it is motion by Director Landsberg, second by Vice Chair Stallard. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion carries 4-0. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3, public comment. So public comment for items that are not listed on today's agenda, or if you can't stay for that agenda item, please feel free to come up to the podium now, and we can go from there. Any public commenters? All right. No electronic.
No electronic either, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, fiscal year 2022-23 budget update, and I'll turn that over to Tim.
All right, thank you. I'm Tim Bush, General Manager of the Woodland-Davis Clean Water Agency, and this is our typical mid-year budget update. There is an action item at the end of the update, as this is the first year that we're actually requesting an increase in our budget. All the previous years of the agency's existence during operation, we have consistently come in a bit under, and I felt like I wanted to start off with that. So kind of our mid-year budget this year, our budget really contains 2 budget items. We have the debt service category. That is, that number does not change. That will be the same number through the life of the loans. That debt service is for repayment of the loans that was used for construction of the agency's facilities. We started paying that back 2017, I believe it was, and 20 years for Woodland's loan and 30 years for Davis's loan. So we'll be doing that for quite a while yet. The $9.73 million budget is for operations and maintenance. That covers all the costs of treating and delivering drinking water to the agency's partners. It covers everything from the operations side, salaries, electricity, chemicals, water right permitting fees, agency staff work, and that kind of stuff. And that budget has been relatively consistent over the past several years since the agency started operation. We've been right around between 19.5 and 20.5 million pretty much every year since we started. So the mid-year budget that was in the packet includes basically our actual through end of November, what we expected through December, and then a projection through the end of the fiscal year, which ends on June 30th of this year. There's a couple pieces of good news. We are projecting to be under for electricity by almost $300,000. That was largely due to the rather severe curtailment of our water rights this year, which resulted in the agency treating and delivering less water, which then resulted in using less electricity. The other budget decrease item is the joint intake erosion control project. That is the project to address some erosion on the Sacramento River levee immediately south of our intake. We're working with RD 2035 to get that work completed, and it wasn't possible to get that built last construction season, so that money is unspent throughout this, this budget year. There is one area, however, of a budget increase, which is the subject of the action item following the presentation, is we did spend, as you may recall, around $5.25 million in total in water purchases last year. First, want to go into a little bit the background of why that happened. The agency owns 2 water rights. We have a 45,000 acre-foot primary water right from the State Water Board. That is a very junior water right. It is subject to what's called a Term 91 curtailment. And what that means is that when the State Water Board determines that supplemental water needs to be released from reservoirs to maintain Delta water quality objectives, they declare the Term 91 curtailment to be in effect. Once that happens, our ability to use our primary water right drops to 0. We typically receive no notice of when that happens. We hear rumors a day or two ahead, but typically we get a notice at like 4 or 5 p.m. on a Friday saying curtailment starts right now. That is a normal summer curtailment. It happens probably 9 out of 10 years, typically in the summer months, starts around June, ends around October typically. So the agency also owns a CVP water right, is a Sacramento River Settlement Contract water right. That's 10,000 acre feet. That's from the Bureau of Reclamation from Lake Shasta. That water right has a term in it called Shasta Critical Year. When Lake Shasta does not achieve a certain amount of storage by, I forget the date in March, by some date in March, Reclamation will declare it a Shasta Critical Year, which in our contract then cuts our water supply by 25%, from 10,000 acre feet down to 7,500. Last year, as you may recall, was really the 3rd year of drought. Lake Shasta was very, very low. The amount of water in Lake Shasta simply didn't allow for delivery of nearly that much water, even at 75%. So the Bureau of Reclamation cut our water right by 82%, leaving us with only 1,800 acre feet of water to use throughout the summer months. And at the same time, they were telling us that the curtailment could start even as early as March. Then it was April. We got a little bit of rain April and May. Ultimately, it didn't start until June 3rd. But we had to be prepared for starting water deliveries on a different water supply essentially as early as April last year. Just for frame of reference, 1,800 acre feet is really only about 3 weeks worth of water for the agency if the partners were taking the amount of water that they need. 30? 13. No, sorry, 3. Sorry, 3 weeks. Yeah, we use, if the partners are getting the water they need in summer, we use about 82 acre feet per day, which ends up being about 3 weeks worth of water. So we had a problem that we had to solve. So what we did do, as the board may recall, we did purchase some water for summer water use. We bought 6,000 acre feet from South Sutter Water District, then another 1,300 acre feet of Conaway Preservation Group water. So for summer water supply, we purchased 7,300 acre feet of water to mostly make up for the 8,200 that we lost. And then we also purchased, as we do every year, an option agreement for winter water supply. We did 2,000 acre feet from South Sutter Water District. We ended up using that water supply from November 1 until December 7 this past year. December 7th, the curtailment ended for us. We use that water rate as little as possible. We actually set the water treatment plant to operate just below its minimum rated capacity at just under 21 acre feet per day. And then basically we do that mainly to maintain health and safety, keep our water treatment plant running, and keep our water and our transmission main safe to drink. More so than really, we use it for partner deliveries as well, but kind of the biggest reason for us is to keep the plant actually alive during that time. So we ended up using 700 acre feet of the 2,000 that we had arranged for. Next slide, please. So the recommendation, I can take any questions you may have as well. So one of the recommended board action is to amend the agency's budget to increase it by the 4.4 million to just over 24.8 million to account for the water purchases that we did. It doesn't really change, it does not change how much revenue the agency is seeking from its partners. We use unspent money from last year's budget, and then some of the agency's reserve fund to cover the water transfer agreements that we did do. So it's just really amending the agency's total budget for the allowance for spending the money that we essentially already have spent. So with that, I can take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. We'll bring it back up here for any questions.
I have one. So no increase to ratepayer.
Correct. Yep.
And that's for this current fiscal year.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
you know,
next year, if the same continues?
I'll cover that in the next
Okay.
presentation. Yeah, no, this is something that we knew when the agency started operations. We knew that one of these years we would be in a severe drought situation and would need to do what happened last year. So we were prepared. So there's not an impact to the ratepayers because we had previously known this was a potential at some point.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Any other questions for Tim? No? All right, we will open it up to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room? Seeing none. Any electronic? All right, we'll bring it back up here. Any other director conversation, comments?
You asked for an action item on this?
Yes, to approve the budget amendment to increase it by 4.4 million to 24.8 million.
I'll respectfully offer that motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, moved by Vice Chair Stallard,
I'll second.
second by Director Vitla.
One note of clarification, that's actually item number 5 on the
Yeah, that's what-
agenda, is to approve the budget appropriation.
Sure, yeah, I didn't know if you were just putting them together. I was just,
Yeah, I kind of put them together.
yeah. Okay. All righty, so, any other questions, comments from anyone in the room or here? No? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Tim.
Cool, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 6, the Woodland-Davis Clean Water Agency General Manager Update and Operations Manager Update.
Cool, thank you. So Stan and I will split handling this item. I'll start first and then turn it over to Stan. We typically do a operation update on how the agency has been working the last several months since we last met. Topics are typical to the meetings. We talk a little bit about water supply outlook, how things are looking going forward, and then various things going on at the water treatment plant itself and intake. Next slide, please. So first, water supply outlook. This is a graph that I think you've seen at numerous meetings before. This is the Northern Sierra 8-station index. This is 8 gauging stations that basically feed into the Sacramento River watershed. It kind of helps, and this is updated every day. So it kind of gives us a really good look at how is the overall watershed looking in terms of water supply. So on the vertical axis is cumulative precipitation, and then across the bottom is the dates. The top of the shaded area is the average. And one thing I did learn how to do recently is customize the graph. Say that again. One thing I did learn how to do recently is to customize the graph. So I customized the graph.
Thank you.
So I'm showing the water years every year since we started operation. So one thing that's, I think, kind of interesting about the graph is none of the annual graphs come anywhere close to being average. 3 of the years since we started operation have been very much above average, 5 of them below, and 3 of them are the last 3 years. The darker blue line is the current water supply through yesterday, as of yesterday. So we're about 125% of average as of yesterday. But if we go through the end of February without precipitation, we'll be pretty much close to average at that point. And we're still below what we got last year by a little bit. So it's a great start to the rain year, but we definitely need a lot more to help get us actually out of drought. Next slide, please. You've seen these graphs before. This is Lake Oroville water storage as of yesterday. Again, the top of the shaded area is average, and then across the vertical axis is storage volume, and the bottom is dates. The dark blue line, the solid blue line with a 2.4 million acre feet on it is storage as of yesterday. Lake Oroville is a bit above average for this time of year, and it does have a pretty healthy snowpack above it. So the expectation is Lake Oroville is actually doing pretty well. That watershed is doing pretty well, and that's reflected in the state increasing their water allocation to contractors to 30%, which they did, I think, a week or 2 ago. Next slide, please. So now for the, a bit of different news. So Lake Shasta, however, is still below average. It's about 56 or so percent of capacity right now, 2.6 million acre feet. It is below average for this year. The Shasta watershed seems to have gotten less of the storms than the further southern watersheds did. So it makes it a bit interesting. One bit of good news, though, is Lake Shasta today is about 1 million acre feet more full than it was a year ago at this time. So there is more water storage in Shasta than it was last year at this time. I was on a meeting with the Sac River Settlement Group contractors a week ago, and they're talking about, so a couple things. One, in terms of the hydrology, it looks like it's rather close to whether or not it will be a Shasta critical year this year. It really depends on how the rest of February, March, and April go as to whether or not there will be enough inflow to Shasta to not be a critical year. I'm guessing it probably will be this year, but that's just me.
Tim, is there any projection for what the snow melt will do for Shasta?
Shasta is primarily fed by rain. Most of the mountains above Shasta are snow. Are not high enough to be snow. So it gets a mix of both, but it's primarily rain-fed, not snow-fed. Which is, I think it has an earlier peak than Oroville does and Folsom does even. The other thing that's going on this year, that's kind of a new thing, is Shasta is potentially subject to a different sort of water right restriction. So ordinarily, I would think that right now we would plan on getting 75 or 100% of our, 75% or 100% of our CVP water right. If we get 75%, we would likely not try to do a water transfer this summer. We would be okay with our water rights if that's the case, because I think that the snowpack, if it doesn't get too hot too early, will keep the turn money wind curtailment away until either the end of May or even into June for us, which helps us significantly.
Now, we just approved a budget amendment. Is that to compensate for what happened this past year or for prospective purchases next year?
Just for last year.
So we've amended the budget to reflect our situation that's already happened.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. So we don't know at this point whether we're going to need to buy water next year.
Yeah, correct. If it was just Shasta critical year or not, we would get either 75% or 100% of our water supply, and we would not do a transfer for the summer.
Thank you.
The other thing that could happen, though, is there could be a court decision related to temperature management in the Sacramento River for salmon that could potentially cut our water supply either by zero or by quite a bit. There's no way yet to tell how that's going to go, if it affects us or not. We should hear in early part of March what's going to happen. But I was on a call last week with kind of all the water agencies, northern part of the state, and the consensus was that nobody knows what's going to happen.
Does any of the things happening up in the Klamath River affect us?
No, that's a completely separate watershed from us.
Thank you, because I know they're removing dams up there now, as you know.
Yep. Yeah, this is related strictly to the, it's been in the news the last few years that a lot of the young salmons don't make it going down the river, and it's to try to keep more colder water in Shasta to help them survive better. And the best way to manage that and balance it against water supply. So we're tracking that very, very closely. Our whole team is, but we don't have, unfortunately, a better update at this point on that. Next slide, please. So kind of looking ahead at long-term water supply, I think, as I mentioned, I think Turn 91 will stay away for a while for us, which helps us to get through the summer. If it is a normal Shasta critical year or not, we're fine. So we'll let the board know as soon as we know what happens with Shasta water supply this year, and do we need to try to do a summer transfer or not. We are planning to do a winter transfer for next winter, just because we seem that we need to do that because we always have the risk of Term 91 continuing past October 31 of any given year. And then we're also getting ready to pull the trigger on a summer water transfer if that becomes necessary. Another bit of good news is Woodland is storing water in their aquifer storage and recovery wells. It should have over 900 million gallons in storage ready to use as water supply this summer. So that will help cut down on a water transfer if we have to do that. Other thing that we have on the agenda is, on the update, is Sites Reservoir. I think, as you know, we submitted a letter of interest to Sites Reservoir about a year or so ago. They are working through how much water supply is actually available and who to allocate that to. They got a lot more interest than there is water available. So I think that probably we're going to get cut out of it, just because we're not one of the earlier signing on agencies and that kind of thing. But they are trying to do a water transfer program, which means that we could do a contractual arrangement with somebody who is in Sice Reservoir to get water supply through them if and when we need it. And that may actually be a better fit for us, we think. So more to come on that later, probably not till fall, probably at this point. They're first trying to figure out who gets the remaining capacity in Sice Reservoir, and then this will be, I think, after that. We did have a meeting with Southsider Water District yesterday on a transfer for both a long-term agreement and then also a shorter-term agreement for potentially summer, but certainly winter this year. And then we're working with a couple of other agencies for longer-term supply options, primarily to fix our winter supply issue, and that there's a very large risk of Turn 91 going into November and December. It's actually happened 5 of the last 7 years that we've been in operation, so it's too big of a risk for us not to have water supply. And then also some availability for summer, in certain summers when we may need some additional water. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to Stan.
All right, Stan Grichko, Operations Manager. I'll conclude the presentation. So capital improvements upcoming. So I think we do have some repairs to the finished water pipeline that was struck, as the board knows, was struck by a boring company. We are planning on early March completing those permanent repairs. It was patched at the time, but we are planning on that permanent fix here beginning of March. McGuire Hester is performing that action. It will result in Davis and UCD being without water for about 5 days is the planning horizon there. And in March, we're fine with that, yes. Also we did, as mentioned before, one of the raw water flow meters out at the intake did have some issues. Jacobs is getting ready to replace that. We are on using the other side of the pump station that has the meter available, so we have that ability. And then joint intake projects, as we have planned for a bit of time now, we need to modify the roof access to be safe for entry. And then also the screen cleaning, and then also the screen cleaning wire. So those are still in process with Jacobs. Contractors have been very difficult to get a hold of in these times, and parts have also been a challenge as well. So those are ongoing.
Dan, how about the shoreline repair?
So yeah, as mentioned earlier, that's also in the works too. Tim is working with RD 2035 to see about getting a contractor to move forward on that. As mentioned earlier, the money that we had in for this budget will simply be reallocated for next year to accomplish that, hopefully this summer. This is the first time actually that the water got up to where it covered it again in a number of years. So it still provides that there's a need there to do it. One caveat on that is the permitting agency wanted us to cover the riprap with dirt after we were done, and we're trying to avoid that because that's the whole point of having the riprap is not to have the erosion. So we'll see if we're successful on that front. Next. So also as reported, we did have a transformer failure. We are planning and we're just getting ready to sign the contract. We have some insurance changes that we're looking at with the contracting, but we are bringing in a third party to do an investigation. This was the second failure that we saw of a similar type regarding the wiring that was underground in conduits. So we are bringing in a third party. Jacobs did their own investigation with San Joaquin Electric, but we felt it's important for the agency to protect its interests and bring in a third party to look at that and kind of conduct its own investigation. So that should be happening pretty quick. In addition to that, not just looking at the cause or root cause, but also are there any procedures we can implement to kind of be proactive in understanding if there's these challenges moving forward, right? So there might be some power monitoring equipment we can install that Jacobs could monitor. There might also be some O&M or preventive maintenance procedures that we can implement to assist us in making sure this doesn't happen again. So that's in the works, should happen. The effort itself should be pretty quick. I'd say a few months, 2 to 3 months, that we should have that report wrapped up. Okay.
Quick question.
Yep.
This was a design, build, operate project, hopefully to insulate us from the consequences of design failure. Is there any negotiation going on with Jacob for responsibility for this problem?
At this point, no. You get into the discussion. It is a DBO. However, there were approvals at points granted with construction management and those things. So that's a discussion that we probably will have at some point with our legal team, with Josh. But right now, it's more focused on let's not see if we can prevent any further damage from occurring, and then we will absolutely probably have those discussions with Jacobs. Yeah. Mhm. Yep, please. On operations, as mentioned, we started this about a year and a half ago now. So due to shortages in ferric, we are using alum as our coagulant. We still plan to do that. We want to have the ability to do both. So we're permitting to be able to do both. The board has State Water Board has a couple, board staff have a couple questions around that, but we'll get those resolved. That will give us flexibility so that if costs increase with alum, we can switch back to ferric or vice versa, or if there's a shortage, we can make those adjustments without having to worry about getting in front of the State Board staff and getting that temporary approvals. And we're still looking at Jacobs. This has been ongoing too, but we want to clear up some of the other questions with the State Board. Is they do want to do remote monitoring so that the staffing at night is minimal. They would be basically monitoring via the computers, able to respond, able to handle anything and respond in person if needed. That's actually not necessarily as common for water plants. Wastewater plants do it quite frequently. Smaller water plants certainly operate that way. So staff is working closely with Jacobs to make sure that we're all square and comfortable with that approach before we would go down that road. And then just as an FYI for January, we used to do a different slide. I kind of condensed it a bit, but we're pushing about 12 million gallons a day to the different partners. Woodland is still feeding their ASR, so they get the lion's share of that. Davis is using roughly 4 million gallons a day, and then UCD takes their small allotment as well. Okay. And any questions on that, if you have any?
Sure. Director Landsberg?
I think a couple of weeks ago, we got a report about the turbidity in the water that's there now. And then there was some process of cleaning that up, and it costs more money to do that. Can you go over that?
Well, so from a perspective of the treatment process, if you have more turbidity and more total organic carbon, TOC, it takes more chemical to treat and then filter, and then you have to run, the filters have to backwash more frequently, so that takes more. So just the processes have to work a bit harder in order to remove that material. On the flip side, when you have a lot of silt and sand in the water, it actually filters better. Because when you add the coagulant, that really grabs onto the small particles with the sand and other material that's in there now from the river. But there is some additional costs with chemicals and filter backwashes that take a little more energy and a little more chemical.
All right. Any other questions for Stan or Tim? All right, I have two quick ones, Stan. One is on the operations side, the slide that's up here now, is there any precedent out there already for agencies using dual or having dual approval for this type of use? Or would this be the first of its kind?
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure that it's other agencies are able to do that. A lot of them use alum, a lot of them use ferric.
Right.
Depending on testing, which one works better. Ours actually works both effectively. Tim, I'm not aware if there's any that are permitted for both.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure if a lot of other agencies are quite permitted for both. A lot of them seem to start with one and stick with it.
Yeah.
And we would have stayed with ferric had it not suddenly become unavailable to us.
Yeah, I think with what we've seen over the past couple of years, we think it's prudent to have that flexibility moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was thinking was if the chances are we get it, because it seems like being able to pivot on the fly, especially from a cost perspective of moving to the other one without having to go back in front of the board would be a great asset.
Sure, and part of that is showing and demonstrating that the plant runs effectively
Right.
with both, right? So that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What interest does the state have even in this issue?
Well, we're permitted, our drinking water permit requires certain standards and certain treatments, and we're permitted to use certain processes, and the chemical is part of that process.
So it's a regulatory oversight.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they have some concern that we're just gonna switch which chemical we use at random.
Tell them we're going to put some of each in.
Yes. Yeah, really, we would, for us, it would be a business case decision. Is one of the chemicals suddenly increased in price or availability problems, and then we would switch to the other. Otherwise, we won't change.
Yeah, I mean, for consistency, we're going to stick with one, but having that ability to switch without having to go through asking for a temporary permit amendment and those things just makes sense.
Okay. And then the last question I have on the 5-day repair on that pipeline heading into Davis, does that mean Davis will be just pulling off wells that whole time? And do you anticipate any customers in Davis knowing that, sensing that, changing? I mean, it hasn't been that way previously, but.
No, typically, I mean, in the winter, typically we're virtually 100% surface water.
Right.
However, the groundwater, the wells are running, because we do run them periodically to make sure that everything's square and it's capable to run if need be. But no, typically when we've had to switch like this, and even over the summer when we were a significant portion where we've had to run groundwater, we have not received many calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, any other questions?
You want us to add red dye for those 5 days?
All right, seeing none, thank you for the updates. We'll move on to agenda item number 7. Consider ratification of signed agreement with Sacramento River Settlement Contractors for administration of drought relief funding.
Yeah, I can handle that one, and Josh, help me out if I miss anything. So this is kind of somewhat of a housekeeping item. So I think, as you know, our water rate did get cut by 82% last year. And we did bring this up at the board meeting previously, especially our June and potentially our September board meetings as well, that the U.S. Congress did approve $60 million to the Bureau of Reclamation to release to the Sacramento River Settlement Contractors to kind of help offset the cost of the 82% reduction in our water supply. Bureau of Reclamation in turn then asked Sacramento River Settlement Contractors Group if they would handle the disbursement to the agencies that were affected. So there's about 2.1 million acre feet in water held under the Sac River Settlement Contractors Group. We're 10,000 acre feet, so we're roughly 4.53 something percent. So we were in line for about $272,000. What happened was Sac River Settlement Contractor Group then wanted agreements to be signed by all the agencies, giving us acknowledgement for them to disperse the federal government's money. We thought it could have been handled by an email, but they wanted an agreement signed, so I sent it to Josh. He reviewed it. They also gave us a very short turnaround time. They sent it early November, wanted it back, I think it was like 5 days or something. We had to get it back. So it had been really difficult in order to try to get a special board meeting together to consider the agreement, which was really only just to receive money. There's nothing that can be done with the fact that they had cut our water supply by 82% 6 months earlier. This is really just some kind of money to help offset the cost of that. So Josh reviewed it, and I talked with Josh Chapman about it, our chairman. I tried to get a hold of Tom, but I think he was on vacation during that time. And so I went ahead and signed the agreement, sent it off to a Sac River Settlement Contractor Group so they could release a check to us. So it was really just ratification of the agreement that had been signed back in November. I can take any questions, and Josh can take any questions you may have on that.
All right, any clarifying questions from any of the directors? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. Any members of the public like to make a public comment on this item?
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
if you could ask for a motion and a vote on this, just to ratify the agreement.
Okay. All right. All right, moved by Director Landsberg,
I'll second.
second by Director Vitla. Any further questions, comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're moving right along here. Moving on to agenda item number 8, long-range board calendar.
Rain in the forecast.
So it looks like our next regular meeting is going to be in June 15th. That should be in Davis, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, it says April 20th.
Oh, April 20th, sorry, I was skipping ahead. April 20th in Davis, that's why I was kind of confused, June and Woodland, okay, that makes sense. So April 15th is or April 20th is our next regular meeting, and then June 15th after that, and that's our agenda so far. If there ends up being a need to do a water transfer agreement for summer, it would probably be either the June or April meeting. April may be a bit too early by the time that all the permitting and everything would get handled. But probably the June meeting if we did one.
Saying April 20 at 3 p.m.?
Yes, in Davis.
Thank you.
Since this is our first in-person board meeting in a couple of years, we have been alternating where the meetings are held, just so that only half the board has to travel, essentially, to each meeting. And then we kind of kept the alternating going through the whole time since COVID, so I think we're correct on the alternating meeting location.
Well,
I think we're good with it.
we are actually, I think, at Valley Clean Energy, we've been doing the alternating too, but I suggested we just keep them all in Davis because our staff is in Davis and the like too, so, simpler. Do you record these meetings?
Yes, we do.
Then that's one less complication.
Okay. All right, maybe something, you want to agendize it and bring it back up, or what's the best way to move that forward? I'll turn to Josh. Stan?
Yeah, it should be on the agenda,
Yep.
and any change has to be
Okay,
approved within a resolution.
okay. So we'll add that to the agenda for next month? Or for April, sorry. Okay. Any other comments or questions from our directors on the long range?
Can't read it anyway.
All right, do we have any public comment on long-range calendar? Written or in person? All right, well, seeing none there, we'll move on to agenda item number 9. Board member comments. Anybody, any directors have any comments they would like to make before we adjourn?
I'd just like to say thank you to our staff for the amazing job of pivoting throughout what's been really a very difficult water year, and they've kept us with the water we needed, and very creatively so. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I would echo those comments. When I came onto this board in the middle of COVID, it's like, oh, you're going to go out there and do this water right thing. And I sat down, we're trading millions of dollars and feet of water and meeting with Tim to better understand this and the work that you folks all do on a daily basis to keep, water flow into faucets and have it be clean. The work that happens behind the scenes that the vast majority of people have no idea is going on and goes unrecognized. So thank you for all your continued work on this. Any other board member comments for the good of the order? All right. Seeing that, we are adjourned. See you in March. You said 10 minutes.